Good morning, and thanks for joining today for the Workplace Violence, Can You Recognize the Warning Signs webinar. My name is Denise Keddy, and I am your moderator for this session. A couple of quick housekeeping notes before we introduce our expert panel and our special guest presenter today. The webinar will run approximately 60 minutes in total, and there will be time at the end of the webinar to address some of your questions. If you have questions during the presentation, please post them in the Q&A area on the dashboard. Please take a moment now to visit the handouts area on your dashboard to download today's presentation, which will include contact information for our panel and our special guest presenter, Ron Williams. If you have any issues during our presentation, you can email me directly at denisemkeddy@gmail.com. Just a reminder, today's webinar is being recorded and all accompanying materials are protected by copyright. Our presentation today provides general information and does not constitute legal advice. We recommend that you consult with your own legal counsel to address your specific situation and needs. In addition, our guest speaker today will be discussing warning signs of violence and what to look for regarding a potential threat. If you have a specific situation or concern, we recommend that you reach out to any of our panelists and/or the appropriate authorities. Let's begin. Violence in the workplace has unfortunately become a daily news event. It is important to recognize the warning signs in order to safeguard yourself, your employees, and your organization. And today's webinar has a lot of information, so let's get right to it and meet our panel. Linda Duffy, President, Ethos Human Capital Solutions. Linda is known as the people problem solver. She develops strategies for business leaders to get the right people, systems, and culture in place in their organization so you as a business owner can focus on your business and achieve your goals. She and her team are strategic advisors helping business owners with human resources consulting, recruiting, training, and payroll support. And her clients range from high-tech businesses to manufacturing firms and nonprofit organizations. Linda is extremely well-versed in addressing the concerns of founder and CEO-led businesses. Our legal expert today is Marla Merhab Robinson. Marla is the partner and head of transactional department at Merhab Robinson, Jackson & Clarkson. Marla's reputation among her clients and peers is that she delivers personalized service, and she is responsive, reliable, and extremely well-respected. There are many law firms in Southern Orange County that you can look to, but what sets Marla and her team apart from other legal firms is that she and the members of her firm have worked in the corporate world, so they really have an understanding of the business challenges and legal concerns your company is confronted with on a daily basis. Marla will kick off the webinar today and then turn it over to Ron Williams of Talent Companies. Thank you, Marla. Can you get started?
Yes, thank you very much for all those kind words. Now, I have the pleasure of starting off, and before I do, I want to just tell you a little bit about Ron Williams. Ron has got a distinguished career with the Secret Service over 22 years, but I know him as the CEO and founder of Talent Companies, which is a corporate security and investigation company. And when I say corporate security, that's in many forms. We've used Ron's company on many occasions when we've needed to get into an employee's computer for some reason, whether it be a concern about violence or concern about theft. I tell employers all the time, your employee may think that they've deleted something on their computer, but I can get Ron's company to come in and find it. Or if there's concerns about attack on corporate property. Absolutely wonderful relationship with Talon. And today, though, we're going to be talking about physical security for your employees. And he's going to be talking about prevention, training, assessments, and recommendations. If you look at our agenda today, I will do a very brief legal overview because Ron has so much to provide on some of the statutes that apply. Then Ron will discuss, as I said, warning signs and behavior, and he'll do so with case studies, some strategies, active threat response, and then some prevention ideas. And if we have time, we'll get to questions and answers. So where does the employer's obligation to have a safe environment come from? It comes from Labor Code Section 6400. Every employer has a duty to maintain a safe work environment. And that doesn't just mean safe equipment. A lot of people think of OSHA and they think, oh, I've got to keep safe equipment. No, it's safety from others as well, from themselves, from other employees, from customers, from other third parties, from spouses, from boyfriends. Unfortunately, we've had this situation happen so many times where it's somebody that's involved in the employee's life, a boyfriend, a spouse, a family member who's making threats against the employees. I want to point out to everyone that if this occurs, you have that duty to keep everybody safe, not just that employee. And we have legal tools that we can use, such as temporary restraining orders and then permanent restraining orders. So please call us if anything like this happens, and we can get into court very quickly. The courts are very receptive to this, and get a restraining order against that person coming around. I have had the unfortunate experience of having clients who've had chairs thrown at them, guns pulled on them, poison in their coffee, physical assaults happen with their employees. Decades ago, it was really somebody would complain because somebody keyed their car. But today, as Ron will show you with some of the examples, and of course everybody's heard it on the news, everything has escalated to a new level. The next slide I included for those of you who might be in the healthcare industry because it's fairly new. It's a 2016 law, but it has a lot of 2018 requirements. So if you are in the healthcare facilities business, please just be aware that there are some new requirements for you. I think every employer knows, because it's been around for so long, that you are required to have an illness and injury prevention program. Even if you're an employer of only one, you can get assistance with writing that program, usually from your workers' comp carrier. And if not, give us a call and we'll lead you to some other solutions. Also, those of you who have over 50 employees and you're doing your sexual harassment training, your discrimination training, now you know it has bullying, but it also has abusive conduct is supposed to be included in that training, which is what leads to this violence a lot of times. I also included the federal code section, which is similar to the 6400 in the labor code section in California, for those of you who are legal junkies and like the codes. But what we want to do today is to focus on prevention, not reaction, which unfortunately is what so many employers do, is they react after the violence has occurred. So I'm going to turn it over now to Ron. Ron.
Well, good morning. The first thing I would like to say is the goal today in this session is not to make you mini psychologists. The goal is to provide tools for you so that you can recognize aberrant and dysfunctional behaviors when somebody is acting out that have propensity for violence, so that when you see certain things that the person does, that it will lead you to believe or understand that that person is moving towards a violent act. So let me start by saying that targeted violence has morphed from workplace violence into targeted violence because some of the incidents don't involve the workplace. People now are targeting certain areas to attack. So it's morphed into targeted violence. And so for you to understand how this happens, you have to understand that a perpetrator who's going to act out, it's not an event, it's a process, meaning that they think about doing a active threat response, an attack. They think about it. And then they verbalize those thoughts. And the verbalization of those thoughts may come in the form of social media, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. It's called leakage. And we're going to get into what we view as a rule of thumb to watch out for. But you have to understand it's not an event. Somebody just doesn't get up in the morning, whistle while they shave, kiss their spouse, play with the kids, pet the dog, go to work, walk in, grab a gun, and start shooting people. It's a process. And this process is what I want to describe this morning. Next slide, please. So what do we use sort of as a rule of thumb? Recognizing that human behavior is not an exact science. In other words, 1 + 1 does not always equal 2 when you're talking about human behavior. But we base our threat assessment on 3 things. And some of this training that I'm giving you is training that I received in the Secret Service and for many, many years doing threat mitigation and threat management. So we base our threat assessment on when we see a person acting out on 3 primary things. Threat posturing. So threat posturing comes in the form of a person making some veiled threats. Let's just say somebody comes to you and says, if you don't stop this, I'm going to get you. Is that a threat? Yes, that is a threat, but it's a veiled threat, meaning that if challenged, I could say, well, I meant that I was going to sue you. It's not a direct threat. It's a veiled threat. And there are types of threats. So the more direct a person gets in their threats, the more dangerous they become. A direct or indirect conditional threat. If this happens, if they fire me, if they terminate me, this is what I'm going to do. That's a conditional threat. Is it a threat that should be considered to be dangerous? Yes, because that tells you that that person is starting to act out. They're making threats, whether it be verbalization, whether it be written, whether it be email, whether it be on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. They're sending a message. They're starting to act out. These messages come in the form of threat posturing. And the more direct the threat becomes, the more dangerous the individual becomes. For instance, if you see somebody talking about, I'm going to get a gun and I'm going to kill somebody, that's a pretty direct threat. But if they say, I'm going to get my .357 and I'm going to shoot that person in the head, now you know that he or she, because where there's dogs, unfortunately, there's dogettes. And people who act out come in all forms. In other words, race doesn't play a part in this. You have Caucasians, African Americans, Asians, Hispanics, all engaged in targeted violence. So forget about race and forget about gender. This is about human behavior. This is about human beings. So threats communicated in threat posturing come in all types of messages. The problem is that the message is sometimes heard, but it's also denied. People are in denial. And we find all the time when we do post-traumatic shootings and we interview people that 2 things are said. Did you tell anybody about this? Did you tell HR? Did you tell your manager? No. Why? Well, I didn't want to become a target. That's the number 1 reason. And number 2, the other reason is I determined that person was acting out, but I never thought they would do that. They never, in their wildest imagination, could conceive that the person would do something so horrendous. So hostile, aggressive behaviors come in the form of verbal and physical, personal space intrusions, malicious glaring, mad dogging. And if you don't get anything from this session, I want you to take this away. People who perpetrate targeted violence are extremely angry. They're angry human beings. And therefore, they're sort of dissociated. They have dissociated themselves with communication with other people. They lack empathy. They lack the ability to really have a lasting relationship with other human beings. And so they detach themselves in an angry mood because they can't have that relationship with other people that is so important to good human behavior and a healthy individual. So they sometimes show aggressive behaviors, punching walls, vandalism, destruction of property, throwing, breaking objects, punching walls, pounding tables, torturing animals. That's an interesting one. And I'm going to get into some case studies that will show you how torturing animals shows a lack of empathy, shows a lack of caring. Also, is there a history of violent behaviors? Because violent behavior is sometimes a learned behavior. If a person has been beaten as a child and has seen violence, they in matters of stress, they may revert to that because they know that it's wrong, but that's learned behavior. Next, please. So when we talk in threat posturing, that is a person moving towards acting out. They verbalize. It's called leakage. They may talk about threats, what they want to do. The second thing we look at is preparatory behaviors. This is interesting because it's called ramping up. That is the perpetrator invests time and resources towards performing a malicious act. They may research and plan. They do checklists. They procure weapons, clandestine excitement with their weapons. Now, that's an interesting discussion, and I don't want to get into the discussion of guns or no guns today. I will say that I don't want to focus on weapons of occurrence because if you take a look at the 19 hijackers, they used box cutters. There's the Boston bombers used homemade explosives that you can get off the internet. We've seen swords, we've seen knives. So it's not the weapon that I want to focus on. It's what they use, they find as a weapon to perform the malicious act. It's behaviors. So that when they procure weapons and they're fascinated with these weapons, like guns, like assault rifles, like machetes, it's the fact that they are fascinated with those because it gives them power. It gives them power over other people. Somebody that is engaged in preparatory behaviors may use open source data searches of targets. They may engage in surveillance of the area that they're going to attack. They often engage in social media announcements, and they test security and responses and do timing and trial runs. That is not unusual for somebody that is going to engage in an attack. Next, please. Rehearsal fantasies. This is an interesting form of gauging somebody's level of dangerousness, because it's been our experience when we examine targeted violence occurrences, in almost every instance, we find that the person showed obsessions and fixations with malicious themes. They visit violent films. They get transfixed on violent films. A good example of that was the individual that shot and killed, shot President Reagan. He was focused on the film Taxi Driver because it showed malicious and intense anger and violent acts. So when you see somebody that focuses on these types of films and videos, they are fixated with these types of things. They're rehearsing their fantasies and actually living through some of these. They engage in reputed communications of what will transpire. It's called leakage to a third party. They want to talk about it. They romanticize past instances of violence, active shooters and body counts. They focus on Columbine. They will focus on Hui Cho, who perpetrated the horrendous act at Virginia Tech. So they often put manifestos and videos on their sites. And I'm going to get into some case studies here in a moment, but I want everyone here to understand that when you start seeing somebody engage in threat posturing and they get more and more specific with their threats, they're moving towards action. It's a process. So you have threat posturing, preparatory behaviors, and rehearsal fantasies. Let's step for a moment and take a look at some case studies. Scott Evan Ducry, 41, happened in Seal Beach, October 12, 2011. He went into the Salon Meritage. He shot 9 people, killing 8. His ex-wife, Michelle Fournier, was the primary target. A month earlier, Fournier had told a friend that Ducry had come to the saloon, had threatened to kill her. He had been threatening to kill her for a very long period of time. She had a temporary restraining order on him. Now, what is interesting is most perpetrators that engage in targeted violence, there is a triggering event that caused them to act. And in this Scott Evan Ducry incident, where he went into the Meritage Salon, 2 days prior to him going into the Meritage Salon, he had gone to court and the judge had ruled against giving him any custody for his son. That caused him to snap, and he then acted out. Next slide, please. So what you saw with Scott Evan Ducry, go back real quick to those 3 things I wanted to. You saw narrowing of focus. You saw that he, a year prior to the event, he started talking about killing her. He was extremely angry at his ex-wife because she had his son and she was denying him access to the son. You saw ramping up behaviors with him buying weapons, and you saw leakage of intent where he told her in no uncertain terms, I'm going to kill you. Next slide, please. Christopher Dorner, February 1st, 2013, he sent a package to Anderson Cooper making these allegations. February 2nd, Dorner ambushed and killed Monica Kwan and fiance Keith Lawrence. And due to time, I can't get into that, but there's an association with Monica Kwan, whose father was a captain with LAPD, who actually tried to get Christopher Dorner kept on LAPD. And when he was terminated, that caused him to snap. That was his triggering moment. Okay. So manifesto from Dorner appears on his Facebook. Dorner shoots and kills 2 Riverside police officers, declare war on LAPD officers. What I want you to see is a pattern developing where the perpetrator acts out, but it starts way before the event. And they are acting out by making threats, posting media, causing leakage. And these are warning signs. These are clear-cut warning signs. Now, I want to digress from the PowerPoint for just a second, because one of the classic cases of somebody acting out happened on May 23rd, 2014, when Elliot Rodger, who was went and stabbed 3 men that he lived with in his apartment, killing them. And then he went and shot three people and himself. The reason I bring your attention to this is because it happened near the UC Santa Barbara campus. The reason I bring this to your attention is you need to go on YouTube and Google Elliot Rodger shooting at UC campus, because he posted a video of himself on YouTube talking about what he was going to do. And he went into great lengths to describe exactly how he was going to perpetrate the shooting. He was showing threat posturing. He was displaying preparatory behaviors because he had purchased weapons. And he talked about how he was going to do it. So he was doing rehearsal fantasies by setting it up in his own mind exactly how he was going to do this. Let's just for a second take a look at some of the other case studies. By the way, just focus on, when we get through with this session, going to YouTube, watching that chilling YouTube posting by Elliot Rodger. All right, Columbine High School, well known, probably the very first large school shooting, occurred in April 20th, 1999. Dylan Klebold and Eric Harris working together. They planned the event as early as April 1998 and had leakage all through that year. Nothing was actually done to prevent it. Virginia Tech, April 16th, 2007. Sun Hui Cho, he was accused of stalking 2 female students in 2005. He had all kinds of warning signs. He posted writings with his professors that talked about killing people, and they were extremely concerned. Next slide. Here's the latest one that I want to draw your attention to, because this really requires your attention. On February 5th, 2016, an anonymous caller to the Broward County Sheriff's Department, Cruz had posted on Instagram, "I want to shoot up my school," and posted a picture of himself with a gun. September 23rd, 2016, counselor reports to Scott Peterson, the deputy Broward Sheriff's Department, Cruz had ingested gasoline and cut himself in a suicide attempt. No action taken. September 24th, 2017, YouTube user Nicholas Cruz post, he wants to become a professional school shooter. The comment was reported to the FBI in Mississippi. No action taken. November 1st, 2017, Catherine Blaine, cousin of Linda Cruz, the mother, called the Broward County Sheriff's Department and reported Nicholas Cruz had weapons. No action taken. November 29th, 2017, Palm Beach family that took Cruz in after his mother died calls the Broward County Sheriff to report that Cruz had fought with her 22-year-old son and threatened to get his gun and come back. No action taken. November 30th, 2017, a caller from Massachusetts called the Broward County Sheriff's Department to report Cruz is collecting guns and knives and could be a school shooter in the making. Broward County Sheriff Office advises callers to call Palm Beach Sheriff. No action taken. As you can see, he is moving towards action steps. Excuse me. On January 5th, 2018, a caller reports to the FBI tip line that Cruz has a desire to kill people and could conduct a school shooting. no action taken. February 14th, 2018, Cruz enters the school. He pulls the fire alarm. He was wearing a gas mask. He kills 14 students and 3 teachers. He discards the weapon and the gas mask and proceeds to integrate himself in the students exiting the school. He planned that. He planned every step, and he escapes with the other students. Next, please. What intervention should have been done? First of all, threats should have been tied into a database that conducted a link analysis to the name Nikolas Cruz. The FBI should have notified Broward County Sheriff of imminent threat. They should have gone and seized any weapons and taken him into custody, or at least done a 5150 commitment. In Florida, that would have been called a Baker commitment. A school anonymous information line should have been available. The Broward County Sheriff should have exercised the Baker Act, placed Cruz in a mental facility on a 72-hour hold for observation, and seized his weapons. When shots rang out, this is my own personal issue, Scott Peterson have responded inside the school to neutralize the shooter. You see, after Columbine High School, first responders redid their training not to wait until a SWAT team got in place, but it's called first there, first in, meaning an officer, and when they hear the shots, that first person there should go in to try and neutralize the attack. And the reason, unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, is that people die very quickly. If you have 3 minutes between the first responders arrive from a call, there's a lot of damage that can be done. Strategies for the future. All companies, all entities, schools should have a crisis intervention response team. It should consist of a director of human resources, general counsel, head of security, a psychologist, perhaps an outside consultant like Talon. And the mission is to assess, monitor, track, document, and direct a course of action. There is a temporary restraining order or a permanent restraining order. We don't have time to get into that today because temporary restraining orders are not for every case. They should be considered on a case-by-case basis. You might think in terms of armed intervention, investigation to confirm the threat, and threat assessment. You must get a profile of the perpetrator, what they're doing at the time. Because remember, they're moving into narrowing their focus. And it's in that process that you want intervention to take place. I recently went to the LA Unified School District on a safety school seminar where I was invited, and saw what the LA Unified School District was doing. And I got to tell you, I was impressed with how they're handling targeted violence prevention and active shooter. They're doing a lot of training. They're training teachers. They're establishing threat assessment teams in all the schools. They're doing everything they can to get a prevention handle to identify those students that may be moving towards action steps. They're teaching teachers what to look for when somebody's acting out. So in talking about intervention and strategies, you need to intervene as soon as possible when you see somebody acting out. There has to be intervention in the form, if somebody makes a direct threat, it is in violation of the California Penal Code 422. I believe it's 422, that is deemed a criminal threat. It used to be called a terrorist threat. Now it is deemed a criminal threat. It can be a felony or a misdemeanor, depending on the levity of threat. So there are laws that are in place for a direct threat. For somebody to be taken off the street, law enforcement then can seize their weapons. A 5150 commitment is somebody that is a mental case that they determine to be a threat to themselves or others, and they can take them and put them into a mental facility for a 72-hour hold, and it allows law enforcement, again, to seize their weapons and confiscate their weapons. So these are some of the steps. When you see somebody acting out, if it's in a company setting, it's imperative that you form an intervention strategy immediately. It may need, and this is where we come in, myself and Dr. Manny Tao work together on many occasions. Dr. Manny Tao is probably the best I've ever worked with. And I worked with a lot of psychologists and psychiatrists when I was in the Secret Service and also in private industry. Dr. Tao and I have worked together for over 15 years, and we've, knock on wood, we've never lost anybody, but we've handled some very, very, very dangerous situations where somebody is acting out. Next slide, please. So, active threat response is an act of violence. Get out of harm's way when you see when somebody is acting out and there's an active threat involved when the shooting starts or somebody is being assaulted. Get out of harm's way. Warn others. Contact law enforcement. Next. We call the response run, hide, or fight. You should, when an attack occurs, you get out of harm's way by running to the nearest exit. Activate any emergency notification system that you can and notify police, but it's imperative that you get out of harm's way. When you take a look historically at Columbine, when Eric Klebold and Dylan Smith went into the cafeteria at the high school, what did the students do? They hid under the tables. That's because they reverted back to the way they were trained on an earthquake or something like that. They made themselves immovable targets. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about get to the exit and get as far away as possible from the occurrence. If you can't do that, you locate a room without glass, preferably one door that can be secured. Turn the sound off on your cell phone. Look for potential weapons in the event your room is penetrated by the perpetrator. This is called hiding. If you are confronted by the attacker, you train to fight, and you have to prepare mentally to fight in order to save your life. Rarely do shooters respond to anyone pleading for their life. Why? Because they've already decided that this is what they're going to do. They've already made that decision. And so your pleading and talking to them doesn't have much importance because they've chosen to kill, not to be swayed by empathy because they have none. Take a look at the video down at the bottom. It'll take you to run, hide, fight. I'm going to divert a little bit from my PowerPoint because I only have a few minutes left. Because I want to tell you about an incident that I was involved in years ago. Back in 1996, I used to attend a health club. I still go there, but as we've all gotten older, there were about 20 guys that all worked out together at about 5:30 in the morning, way back when. Now we go there as old men and we just kind of hang out on the drink coffee and touch the equipment, hoping something happens. But in 1996, we were working out when a guy came in. He was a big, buffed out white guy. And we went over to shake his hand, and he backed off. And you could tell that he was angry. He was detaching himself. And as he backed off, it became apparent that this man was really an angry person. I started watching him, and I realized this guy he's acting out, and he's on his way to become a perpetrator of violence. I could feel it. I could tell. I told my other associates to watch him. One day, two Asian gentlemen were over in the corner. They started laughing. He dropped his weights. He went over, he confronted them and said, if you keep this up and you keep laughing at me, I'm going to kick your butt. Well, that showed that he was also paranoid. At that point, I knew we were dealing with somebody that was extremely dangerous. On a Friday morning, I didn't attend the gym. One of my associates walked out of the gym, and he called him over and said, "Hey, I want to show you something." He opened up the back door of his car, and he had assault rifles and shotguns in the car. My friend did not say anything to anybody. He didn't call the police. He didn't say anything to me. That afternoon, Daniel Marsden went to his place of business in Santa Fe Springs, shot and killed 4 people, and went to Inglewood and shot himself in the head in a telephone booth. The reason I tell you that is because I actually saw somebody in the process of acting out, and I knew inherently he was dangerous. Why? Because I saw a level of anger and detachment that told me that this individual was extremely dangerous. So, because we're coming up on time to finish our session, I didn't get through all my slides. I apologize. There's a number of things that
Ron, this is Marla. I would recommend you jump to the prevention tool slide, and I think we can squeeze in the last 3. I think would be really good.
Okay, let's get to the prevention tools. That's conclusions. Back up a little bit. So, what do we need to do to prevent an act of violence happening? One of the first things you need to do is to do a security risk vulnerability assessment of your facility to understand that you have to limit access egress points. There has to be a way of checking people coming in and out. Application and resume should be extremely viewed. Check references, verify work history, education, criminal background checks. We found some people that have been potential employees who face charges of assault with deadly weapons. But one of the primary prevention tools that we use are interviews. When you interview somebody, we have a whole process of basically about 50 questions that are narrative in scope that reveal a lot about who that individual is. And one of the things you want to hear somebody talk about is trust and empathy, because if they're detached and they are extremely angry, you can pick that up in the interview process. Next. So I want to sort of wrap things up by telling you that violence in the workplace is a process. It's not an event. Unchecked, aberrant, dysfunctional behavior that starts revealing its ugly head, it leads to an escalation of aberrant, dysfunctional behavior. And without intervention, that person is headed to disaster. A person who does not care about himself or herself or the consequences of their action is potentially dangerous to others. When they start talking about suicide, you should pay attention, because if they don't care about themselves, they don't care about you. A person who has lost all hope is potentially dangerous. This is where triggering events come in. This is where Scott DeCry, when he found out that he had lost any semblance of custody of his son, he gave up hope. Every human being gets up in the morning with hope. Hope for a better day, hope for a better life, hope for a better family. All this is in hope. When you lose all hope and you don't care about the ramifications of your actions, you are a dangerous person. Coupled with extreme anger and detachment. The normal progression of a violent act is thought. The person who engages in targeted violence thinks about it. They think about violence. Then they verbalize it, either in verbal form, emails, social media, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Does that mean that somebody is always going to act out? No, but the warning signs were there, and the intervention has to occur when you start seeing it early on, to intervene to stop a potential violent episode of occurring. I've done a lot of post-traumatic shooting episodes where I've gone in and interviewed people. And I tell you, it really breaks your heart when you talk to people who saw the person acting out, knew that the individual was dangerous, didn't say anything about it because, number one, they didn't want to be a target, and number two, they didn't think that the individual would carry it out. So I hope that you've learned, at least given you the tools to pick up on aberrant dysfunctional behaviors that indicate a propensity for violence, and the lesson that intervention is very important early on.
Thank you, Ron. We appreciate your time. We know you had to go a little quickly through your slides, so if you have questions, we have a couple questions in the Q&A section already, so we'll try to get to them. But if you have a question, you can post it, and we'll do our best to get to your questions. If not, we'll follow up with you. Make sure you download the presentation. And in just a second, we're going to put Ron's contact number up on the screen. And contact information for Marla and Linda is listed in the handout, so make sure you download that. One of the questions, Ron, that has come up is, let me ask you this. Can you give me an overview on how you engage with corporations and companies? So you gave us a lot of examples of violence, but how would my organization engage with you for training or awareness?
Yeah, we do a lot of targeted violence prevention and active threat response training. Our program is certified by the California Bar Association for MCLE credit. So what I have tried to impart to you today is usually a 4-hour training program that we basically have condensed to what, 45 minutes. So that, I apologize to you if I was not able to get to all the information, because there's a lot of information to impart. We usually get calls from a labor law attorney or HR or a CFO, because they've seeing somebody acting out or a threat has been made and they need assistance on mitigating that threat and making a threat assessment. They need to know how to manage the threat. Threat management is the secret sauce into all of this, is because it's what you do when you know somebody's dangerous. The intervention techniques then really demand a person of Dr. Manny Tao's caliber to come in and do a forensic profile of the threat. So that's how we're engaged.
Okay, great. So you get calls, I'm assuming, from HR departments and legal departments and CEOs. So you're working with all levels of people within an organization when it comes to a threat or a potential threat.
Yes, but it's best that it comes from a C-level or a director of human resources. Those are normally decision maker has to be a part of that, a part of that call, a part of that dynamic when you start talking in terms of somebody who's acting out and is a threat.
Okay. Denise, I have a question for Ron. This is Linda. Ron, we have a situation that comes up pretty frequently, unfortunately, with clients where I get a phone call that says, like this happened recently, a CEO was on his way out to a remote location to terminate an outside salesperson, and the salesperson had voiced threats to his coworker saying, if the CEO comes out here, I'm going to take him out. And, I'm sure some people think, oh, he's just a big talker or whatever. But what would you recommend under those circumstances? And can companies get local law enforcement involved? Like my recommendation was to call the police, report it, and ask them to do a keep the peace call and escort the CEO out there. Like what other ideas do you have that they can use when they have that situation come up?
Yeah, they can call us. We frequently provide our armed off-duty police officers, our former police officers, to go to locations and provide armed security. And let me just say real quick, there is a huge difference between armed security and unarmed guards. Unarmed guards are there as a visual deterrent for theft, and they are there to observe and report. They are not crime interventionists or crime suppressionists. We actually have a cadre of armed officers that go to locations and provide a secure environment. But you're right, the first call should be to law enforcement. The problem with law enforcement, and I, being an ex-law enforcement officer, I hate to say this, but law enforcement officers are really trained for reactive response. In other words, if you call LAPD and you say this person's been doing this, this, and this, the real response that they're going to give you is call us when he does that. Call us when they act out. And that's an unfortunate reality, and the reason is because they're so tied up with things that are going on. There are police departments that are very proactive. I can think of Irvine Police Department, very proactive police department. Huntington Beach, some of the departments are very proactive, and you'll get a police response. But if you don't, do not think that if somebody is making these kind of threats, don't blow it off. Don't think that it's not going to occur. Always, go to your gut reaction and pick up the phone and call us. We'll provide protection for you.
Okay, great. I see that we're running out of time, so we'll get back to anyone with the answers to the questions that you have gotten to us. And then, Linda, can you jump in and let us know what we are looking toward for next month?
I can. Ron, thank you so much. You're clearly such an expert on this topic. And I would encourage people to review the slides and also to reach out to Ron. As it said on the one slide, they can come in and do training for your workforce. They can come in and do a risk assessment or a threat assessment of the physical security if you have an employee situation, and they can also provide physical security under those circumstances, like I mentioned, if you need somebody to be present. We've done that on a number of occasions, and I know Marla has as well, to have somebody present during, especially if it's going to be a nasty termination or maybe a layoff that's going to go on all day, because as Ron mentioned, those can be triggering events. Our next month webinar is going to be May 17th, our usual time. We're going to do something a little bit different, and we are going to have sort of an open forum, Ask the Experts. You can send questions on whatever topic you want, obviously. Like, don't send me a question on cooking because I don't cook, but send me questions or send Marla questions on anything, on any topic having to do with employment and labor law, and we will answer those in that webinar, and we'll allow some time for people that have spur-of-the-moment questions as well. But send them to us ahead of time. We'll group them together. We'll sort through them so there's not duplicates. So if you just have a burning question about, a leave of absence or sick pay or how to calculate overtime or whatever it is, this is just an open hour for you to ask questions of us, and we'll do our best to answer them for you. So the link below is to register. We'll send out a follow-up email with this link, as well as the link to the video that Ron mentioned. It's about a 6-minute YouTube video that I watched. I thought it was useful information, something that you could easily show to employees as well. So we'll get that out to you in the next day. Thanks so much, Denise.
Linda, I just want to, this is Ron Williams. I just want to apologize. There was an awful lot of information here that we traditionally do seminars, 2 to 4 hours. And so I tried to compact it as much as possible, but I apologize if I didn't get to all my slides.
That's fine, Ron. I think that the slides are very content rich, so I'm sure if people have questions, they can reach out to you directly.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great week.